my name is Perry, and welcome to the Literary Knitterary. Have you ever put lipstick on to try to convince yourself that you're in a good mood? So somehow it is now December, which means that it is time to film my November wrap-up. As I'm sure many people are, I'm having a little bit of a rough time, and sometimes you're having the kind of a rough time where you shotgun a bunch of sapphic books in a row, and sometimes you're having the kind of a rough time where you don't read anything for 3 weeks. Somehow, November contained both. But that should make this a quick little ditty of a video. I read 4 books in November for a total of 1,392 pages. That is an average of 348 pages per book, or 46.4 pages per day. All 4 books were 2020 releases, so their average age is 0 years and the mode release year is 2020. All 4 books were ebooks that I borrowed from my library. In terms of genre, 2 of them were adult contemporary romances and 2 of them were YA contemporaries, and of course in terms of age category that means that 50% of what I read was YA. Let's get right into it. The first book I read in November was Well Played by Jen DeLuca, the much anticipated by me follow-up to Well Met. This is a series of adult romance books set in and around a Renaissance fair, and this book follows Stacy, who is sort of the best friend character in the first book. Stacy loves working the fair, but when she sees Simon and Emily, the couple from the first book, get engaged, she realizes that she feels a little bit stuck and stagnant in her life. She didn't really intend to be in her small town for this long, and basically when fair ends and she realizes that she has nothing to look forward to for an entire year, she drunk texts her previous on-again, off-again fair hookup, who comes to the fair to perform with his Celtic rock band. And of course the 2 of them start talking and flirting over text and email, but, and this isn't a spoiler, it's in the blurb of the book and stuff, it turns out that she's not talking to the person she thinks she's talking to. And then it kind of goes on from there. I have felt weird about this since I heard the premise of the book, and pretty much it went how I was kind of expecting it to go, which is a shame because I loved the first book so much. Yeah, all of my problems with this basically stem from the sort of catfishing issue. They flirt and talk for an entire year. There's an entire year of text messages, and that's probably 60% of the book before Stacy figures out what's going on. But you know from the beginning because it's on the back of the book. And I feel like in a romance novel, that kind of dramatic irony is just not comfortable. It was really hard for me to get invested in the flirtation because I was waiting for the other shoe to drop because I knew, and the character didn't know, that she was being lied to. I think I found it more stressful than you usually want to find the flirty part of a romance. And then when she does find out what's been going on, she forgives and moves on from the issue really, really easily, which I'm not trying to critique the behavior of the character. I think I'm just trying to say that the author didn't 100% sell me on the fact that a realistic person would do that. Because again, it goes on for an entire year. So yeah, I just think that that kind of tension, the tension of knowing that one of the characters is lying to the other one and that something bad is going to happen to the main character, is not the kind of tension I enjoy in a romance book. There were some sweet moments in this, and there was a cute kitty cat in the book as well, but overall this one just wasn't magic for me the way that the first one was. 3 stars. After that, I read Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner, which is another adult romance. This one is set in Hollywood. So basically, Emma works as a personal assistant to this celebrity showrunner named Joe, and Joe one day invites her to this awards show to come with her to sort of shield Joe from any annoying questions she doesn't want to answer from the press. But while they're there are pictures taken of them that make it look like they're a couple, where it looks like they have this really great chemistry, and so all of the tabloids start sort of running with the rumor that they're dating each other, which is not great because Emma is not used to that level of publicity, first of all, and second of all, wants to have other jobs eventually in the movie business and doesn't want the reputation of getting ahead by sleeping with her boss, right? But to make things even more complicated, the feelings that started out as rumors might be based in the truth. This is Berkley's first female-female romance, if I am not mistaken, and so I really appreciate all of the sort of hype and buzz that it has gotten for that fact. And it was pretty good, but it didn't change my life. One of the things I appreciated about this was its sort of discussion of racism and other biases in the entertainment industry alongside the sort of Me Too movement in the entertainment industry, both in relation to the central romance because Joe is Emma's boss and there's a power dynamic there, and in relation to a third party in the book. So I think that was definitely valuable. The pacing in this is interesting because it actually takes place over an entire year, I suppose the same way that Well Played does, but unlike with Well Played, there's not a clear reason like a Renaissance fair for why it needs to take an entire year. And I just don't think I'm used to things being that drawn out in my romance novels. It would kind of be a little bit jarring for me when the author would just be like, and then they didn't talk about it for 3 weeks, and 3 weeks would pass, or a month would pass, or something, and I would just find that a little bit disorienting, because I think it's not what I'm used to. Basically, this is aiming to be a very slow burn, which should really work for me. I like slow burning romances, but I don't think there's enough tension here to sustain that kind of romance. It's not burning enough to be a slow burn, if that makes sense. There isn't a clear enough reason why the two of them can't just talk to each other and work out their issues. Since there's no clear reason that they can't talk to each other and work out their issues, you're a little bit frustrated wondering why they don't just talk to each other. While I was trying to figure out why this book didn't work better for me, I was thinking about the relationship from The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which is also a very slow burn sapphic relationship with kind of employer-employee dynamics, although in like ye old fantasy setting. But in Priory, there are plot and world building reasons behind why the two characters can't just talk about their feelings and be together however and whenever they want, right? Whereas in this, because it's set essentially in our present day real world, there's like some minor obstacles, but really they could just talk about it and have a conversation and stop being silly. So basically I did enjoy this, but I didn't love it because I didn't think there was enough tension in here to sort of support the slow burn structure that the author was going for. 3.5 stars. After that, I read I Kissed Alice by Anna Birch, which is a YA contemporary that I read because I am a big sucker for those sapphic YA books with the illustrated cover with the two girls on it. I think it started with the Falling in Love montage by Sierra Smith, which I actually haven't read, but then every time I see a cover like that, I just like want it. That's also part of the reason that I read We Used to Be Friends by Amy Spalding, is that it has that kind of cover. This is an interesting one. This is a story about two girls who have the same best friend but aren't really friends with each other, and they all go to the same like arts magnet boarding school. So they go to the same school, they have the same best friend, they hang out together, but they don't like each other, they're rivals. And it gets complicated by the fact that both of them write and draw this Alice in Wonderland reinterpretation fan comic on the internet and have this like deep emotional relationship with their co-author, but they don't know that the other girl who they don't like in real life is their co-author who they kind of are in love with online. I don't know, it's like online secret identity month over here or something. So that's basically the pitch, is it's like enemies to lovers if they were simultaneously enemies and lovers, but they didn't know it. Kind of. So I picked this up because of the cover, and so I have to say that the outside doesn't necessarily match the inside. The inside of the book is a lot sort of heavier than I think the cover makes it out to be. It's not a rom-com, it's not a fluffy book. There are some more serious discussions in here, including a discussion of like how depression and other mental health issues impact creativity that I felt very personally targeted by. Definitely valuable, but just like not what I was expecting going in. This is also an interesting book because like I have the thought sometimes that like if a book was told from a different point of view or with slightly different stylistic choices, a different focus, and the same things happened and the same characters were in it, but it would be a totally different genre, if that makes sense. So like this one is interesting because if the narrative had focused on different things, like if the same things happened, but the focus, the weight afforded to different events was different, this could totally be a dark academia book with like just a few tweaks. And it could totally lean into like the Southern Gothic vibes of like the boarding school and all these artists that are in like cutthroat competition with each other. There's like sabotage and stuff in the book. Like this totally could have been a really cool dark academia book, but it didn't really go in that direction. I also felt like the writing, the prose had a couple of weak spots. I don't know if anyone else has ever had this experience, but when I was reading, I was thinking to myself, like, this author has a favorite word and I know what it is, because it was this like somewhat uncommon word that appeared a couple too many times in the narrative for it to just be like the best word for the situation, if that makes sense. And so it very much had the vibe of like you got your dictionary.com word of the day and you're like trying to use it in a sentence. And I'm not saying that that's a fault in the writing, like we all have favorite words, or I guess words that you could feel are really closely tied to one of your characters or something, one of your point of view characters. I just thought it was funny because I was like, I can tell. I don't think you wanted me to be able to tell, but I can tell. Just like with Well Played, this sort of identity reveal that's going to clear up the online real life conflict here doesn't come into the narrative until way later than I expected it to. I also kind of have some qualms about the like queer representation in the book. All three of the main characters, the three sort of best friends that I mentioned, identify as queer. Two of them never elaborate on it, and one of them identifies as bisexual on the page, but then later in the book she makes a weird comment about how like she had a disastrous relationship with a boy while she was still figuring things out, which not every person who uses the label bisexual is attracted to men, not every person who uses the label bisexual chooses to date men. I understand that, but the way that that comment was made and with no further elaboration on it, it sounds like she's saying it was a disastrous relationship because it was with a boy, and I didn't yet know that I wasn't attracted to boys, but she never clarifies whether she is or isn't. Like everything, it just felt murky, right? If she was using the term bisexual in a way different to the way it's most commonly used, she didn't explain that fact, and then making that comment later just kind of hit me in a weird way. And I totally understand that being in an established relationship with one person while you are coming to terms with your attraction to multiple genders can be a complicated moment to be having. But again, the way it's written, it implies that it was a disastrous relationship because it was with a boy and that she's therefore not into boys, even though, you know, 50 pages before it kind of said or implied, the reader would be left to surmise that she is, which, again, just a little bit fuzzy, a little bit murky, maybe a little bit careless. Possibly a member of the group of YA books where you have queer characters, especially queer female characters, who never use words to describe their identities or attractions, which is really weird because, like, have you met teenagers? Have you met teenagers? Teenagers, for the most part, obviously there are exceptions to every rule, but teenagers for the most part are so excited to find a word that describes the way that they've been feeling and connects them to a community of other people who experience the same things, that they tend to latch on to labels and love labels, even if they eventually end up changing or abandoning those labels or moving to a looser system of identification. It just feels somewhat inauthentic to me that there are so many teen girls in YA who only ever describe themselves as not straight or likes girls and don't ever say the words lesbian or bisexual. And I know there are lesbian reviewers that don't like that either, that think that's a problematic trend. And of course there are people who have problems with the label bisexual or problems with the label of lesbian or prefer to just call themselves queer and not explain any further, and that's all totally valid and great, but I feel like that's significantly overrepresented in YA in comparison to the number of people who find labels like lesbian or bisexual helpful to them and use them and explain how they're using them. Like, again, teens love to explain and discuss who they are because that's what being a teenager is about. It's about formulating your identity. So the fact that YA authors seem to be afraid to have their characters be like, this is who I think I am, this is who I think I like, strikes me as really weird. And adding on to a long tradition of bisexual characters in the media who just like don't like labels and are just like fluid, it rubs me the wrong way because that is effectively a biphobic trope, is people refusing to ever say the word bisexual or to say the word bisexual and like mean it, you know? But again, I'm not accusing this author of anything. I'm just pointing out that this is maybe related to that sort of trend in YA books of being way less specific with identity labeling within queerness than feels authentic to me. So I enjoyed this, but the fact that I was thinking about all of these things, thinking about, you know, the author's favorite word and the strength of the prose in general, thinking about twisting the book and making it into dark academia, thinking about the strength of the representation, shows that I wasn't actually that wrapped up in the plot and the characters and the relationship dynamics and the friendship dynamics. Like, I was distracted by all of this other stuff and wasn't pulled in enough by the actual core elements of the book to correct for it. Probably like 3 stars. And finally, I read The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigirdar. So this is a YA contemporary set in Ireland about a young Bangladeshi Irish girl who's in a business class in her high school, and for the business class, all of the students or like student groups have to come up with and run their own business, and it's a competition with like a cash prize. And so she decides that she has been exploring her like talent for henna art. And so she decides that she's going to make that into her business. She's going to do henna art for people. And the sort of conflict of the book comes in when there's this other girl who is of Brazilian descent who also is opening a henna business. And so the main character feels that this is cultural appropriation, that this is someone doing a small amount of research about her culture and then trying to use it for their own monetary profit. And so she is angry about this, but she's also kind of crushing on the girl at the same time. This is further complicated by the fact that the main character, Nishat, is getting bullied at school for both her ethnicity and her sexuality, and the main bully is the cousin of this girl that she likes, and is the cousin's business partner of this like competing henna business. And the story also follows Nishat coming out to her parents, which is a little bit complicated. So from all of that, you can probably surmise there's kind of a lot going on in the book. This is another one where the cover doesn't quite match the inside, because from the cover, I actually thought this was a middle grade novel. It's definitely YA, and it's definitely a little heavier than you might be expecting, with specifically, I would say, a content warning for like public outing of a character. This is kind of billed as hate to love. It's not so much hate to love as like, I like you, but we're rivals and I have so much stuff going on to like, maybe things are working out for us, if that made any sense. In general, I would say I enjoyed this. There's lots of good conversations going on in here about intersectionality and cultural appropriation, and I think my favorite part was probably the relationship between Nishat and her younger sister. I thought that was a really realistic and like joyfully depicted sisterly relationship, which is not necessarily something I was expecting to take away from the book, so it was a really pleasant surprise to find it. I hope this isn't like too much information, too personal for the internet, but like because this was obviously the last book I read before I didn't read anything for like 3 weeks, I feel like I was descending into a kind of a fuzzy, brain foggy place when I was reading this, and now I don't remember it all that well. Like obviously I remember the broad strokes, I remember some of the things I liked about it, but I don't remember in detail how it made me feel. So that's my review. So yeah, I would say if you're interested in this one, go ahead and pick it up. You have Nishat celebrating her culture, you have some really sweet scenes in the sort of developing romantic relationship, and you have just like a gem of a sisterly relationship on the page. Check it out if you think you would like it. I think I gave it like 3.5 or 4 stars, maybe, probably, maybe. I think that's it for today. I think it is high time for me to stop talking. Comment down below and let me know how your reading month in November was, what the best thing you read was, or if you don't have the brain space or like social energy to write a full comment, as I myself frequently do not, you can just leave me an emoji that symbolizes your current read in some way. Maybe I'll try to guess what book you're thinking of. That will never work out. There's so many books in the world. If you liked this video, I hope you will consider subscribing, and I will see you again soon. But in the meantime, I hope that everybody is staying happy, healthy, and safe, and I hope that somewhere out there there's a great book waiting just for you. Bye.